Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Vanessa Dunn, Guyton, and I am the proud founder and executive director of Hush No More. Hush No More supports survivors when they're ready to come forward to get resources, to get help, or just to have somebody to listen to. We also provide training in our communities on what we call the hush topics: sexual assault, domestic violence, sex trafficking, child sexual abuse, incest, all of those topics that individuals and organizations have a hard time discussing. That is what we do. And so every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have Hush No More Champions, where we bring on survivors, advocates, and nonprofit organizations to talk about the hush topics and to inform our communities of what's going on, what's happening, how you can get help. So I hope that you always stream live with us, join us because it is so important. You can also listen to us on our podcast, Hush No More Champions, as well. So tonight we are going to talk about alcohol, drugs as it relates to trauma. So I'm going to bring in my guest. Hello, Jesse.
Hello. You caught me trying to share this onto my page. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. Hello.
Hi. So tonight we have Jesse here with us, and he is the mindset and empowerment architect. I love your title, Jesse. Tell us a little bit about you.
4.5 years, 52 months sober come Thursday is how this entire journey even began, right? 22 years of hardcore addiction, really hardcore drug use for about 10, 15 years of that. And through, my mother getting Crohn's disease and my dad having heart attacks and losing both parents at a relatively young age, in my 30s, you find me now at 52 months sober. I do mindset and empowerment architectural coaching. So I really help people understand their mindset, understand how their mind works, get them to realize that most of the blocks they have in life are self-created, and that if they just change the language patterns inside their own head, that they can actually empower themselves to the life that they've always desired, really through seeking out the potential they know has been locked away in them for so long. I am the person, maybe like the key master from Matrix, right? They're just looking for a key, and they've tried it on their own, and sometimes they've only gone to treatment. But one way or another, they find me, and I'm happy to say that I'm glad to be able to help.
So you are the key master, and you help people find the key, right?
Yeah, I've never used that analogy or metaphor once in my entire life. You said you and I were just going to have a good time with this. My brain is literally just creating things as we go. But I'm like, you know what? That's what I do.
I love that. Like, you must patent that because that's so important. And just based on our experiences, we come up with new things, new ideas, and to help other people. So I think it's so important for us to have this discussion now. You mentioned your alcohol and drug addiction, right? And we never think about the trauma that goes on in our life. Did you consider that was why you had an addiction or that was going on for you?
I absolutely felt okay. So on June 4th, 1994, I graduated high school, and my parents announced their divorce within a week or two of that occurring. And then on my June 15th is my 18th birthday. Mom wakes me up in my bed and is like, "Hey, Dad and I are going through an argument. He's threatening to take away your sister. I'm escaping. I'm running away to Florida with your sister. Happy birthday." Kisses me on the cheek, and she rolls out. And I started smoking marijuana that night at a Pink Floyd concert. I took acid for the first time about 3 weeks later at a Grateful Dead show, and I found a liquor store willing to sell me alcohol underage between those 3 weeks. And so, I jumped in full bore because emotionally discombobulated as a child. Mom gets Crohn's when I'm 8 years old. Dad's a workaholic. He's never there. I feel like I'm, just sort of left to sway in the wind. And I absolutely remember going to college thinking, man, I got a lot of emotional baggage I have no idea how to handle.
Yeah.
And I knew that there was resources. I knew enough that I could have gone to like the campus therapist, but I also knew that there was beer and shots and LSD and cocaine. And I thought those seemed like a much better therapist at the time than an actual human.
Yeah, because it suppresses. It erases all the pain you can't feel when you're doing the drugs. And, I honor you in this moment because a lot of people won't share what they've been through and the addiction and all of that. They won't say anything. So I think it's very important that we're transparent about our journey. So thank you for that. Uh,
Yes.
and going off to college, it's not like you were on the street, right?
Mm-mm. No. No, and here's the, one of my favorite sayings is that the easiest social circle to join is the addiction one. And we moved around about every year in my childhood because my dad was upwardly mobile. He wanted to buy different car dealerships, and then he wanted to make them better and make lots of money, and then buy another car dealership. So we moved around a lot. I didn't have friends for longer than 9 months to a year as a child. And so when I got to college, I told myself I wanted a lot of friends, and I wanted beautiful women to like me. I wanted dudes to want to hang out with me. And the easiest social circle to join is addiction. You roll into the party with a backpack full of drugs and two 24 packs in your hands, and all of a sudden everybody loves that you're there. And it was just way easier to make friends doing it that way rather than, let's say the responsible way of, joining a club and just showing up and being me. It was much easier just showing up and being, party Jesse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I didn't drink or anything before I joined the military, so I didn't go straight to college, right? That was my journey, was a little different, but everybody drank in the military. And
Mm-hmm.
my first duty station was Germany, and 18, and you could drink at 18 in Europe, hands down, no problem.
Oh,
So
yeah.
drinking, that's when I first introduced myself to alcohol, and it really was because everybody else was, and it wasn't trauma at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
My first introduction to alcohol wasn't trauma. It was so everybody could like Vanessa, so I could join in. Once trauma hit, the alcohol changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't just
Yeah.
that fun anymore. And I think that's important for people to realize that some people start out using drugs and alcohol to try to make you feel better, what's going on. And some people just kind of gradually it starts happening. So like we both have two different journeys that both ended us up addicted.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, but we took two different paths, very different paths.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I'll hear people, I give a lot of clients, I help a lot of different kinds of people, and they'll say things like 9 and 10 and 11 and 12. And I'm thinking, back then I was emotionally screwed up enough, at least in my eyes, I was emotionally bereft enough that had that been an option, perhaps I would have thought about it. So when I hear somebody else got started at 9 or 12, I'm like, wow, I mean, that's some trauma. Like that's a lost soul. And luckily, because of the tools and shows like yours and shows like mine, we have so many more tools available to us that we didn't have in 1994 is when I started. There was no internet, let alone just this amazing, archive of human knowledge called Google. So, but now there's so many different resources. It's almost like the white noise makes it hard to figure out which one is the most beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And every resource is not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people that if you start out looking for help and it doesn't work, don't quit. It's just like finding another doctor. So we have to find what works for us in this moment, in this journey, and try to get through it.
Yeah, don't think that, I have one of my friends, and when I got sober, his first text message to me, and this guy was a roommate of mine for 5 years in Gainesville, where I graduated at UF, and his first text message to me was, "So I take it you found Jesus." And my response back was, "Why would you say that?" He's like, "Well, because you're sober." And I'm like, nope, that's not how this is working out over here. And he was convinced that the only way people get sober is AA, and he was convinced that it was a Jesus cult. And I'm like, well, that's rude, because a 12-step program isn't that. I was like, but there's also other ways as well to get sober and to get into addiction recovery. And it just showed me how many just average citizens out there, if you will, don't realize how many different paths there are to the same destination.
Yeah. Don't people say some stupid stuff?
I mean, first of all, no, I mean, hey, man, I mean, I would say, I mean, me and Jesus don't necessarily break bread together every single day, but I'm pretty cool with the guy. And I don't really understand how that would be a problem, even if I had chosen that route. But for him to be like, well, then you're probably not really sober if you didn't go to AA. And I'm like, yeah, I was like, man, he's like, and this guy, he likes to tip it as much as I used to like to tip it. So I'm just like, we should probably have a conversation, because you are definitely clouded in your judgment about this entire system over here. It's an amazing community of full, like you're Hush No More. People who have gone through suffering and trauma. We come out of that fire, and we're holding buckets ready to help somebody else come out of the fire as well. And it's just an amazing community whenever you really immerse yourself in it.
Yeah, so AA, I tell everybody, saved my life. Kudos to spiritual progress in
Yeah.
Columbia, South Carolina. Those women are my sisters, and we are not blood related. And it's the best thing that I ever did was to stop drinking and to surround myself in a community of people that understood what I was going through. Like simple things like I was craving chocolate and sweets, and they was like, "Oh, that's normal." I'm like, "That's
Yeah.
normal?"
Yeah.
Like after addiction, we start craving different things to make up for the sugar, but I
Hmm.
would not have known that if it wasn't for me surrounding myself around some really good women. Because I only go to women groups. I don't go to ones that have men as well, and,
Okay.
and that's from my sexual assault. So it goes to
Right.
I have a choice in my recovery, and I choose to be around people that look like me, women. I feel safer there. And so every organization, every AA meeting is not for you. And I think that's important for people to see. So what is something that
Very.
you like about AA that would just blew you away when you went?
Well, that's the thing. I never went.
Oh no.
Well, okay. Let me take that back.
How
I
did you
got
do the 12 steps?
completely honest here. I tried AA in college at University of
Okay.
Florida for about 2 months. I complained about a cat every meeting and how the cat would always scratch him, and I can't sit around and listen to this dude complain about his cat anymore. This is annoying to me. And so I decided not to go to AA. I went to GYM. I went to the
Okay.
gym. And
Okay.
that's how and again, it was one of those things like super healthy for 4 months. And then I'd take a drink of alcohol and Mr. Monster would come back out. And I'd have to deal with that guy for 3 months. And then he'd go away and Mr. Jim guy would come back. But what I remember what really surprised me about it was how much it wasn't God driven, because you hear, that you release the power to a higher power, right? You accept that you are unable to control this, and you release it to a higher power. Something, I'm butchering it, but you get where I'm going with this. And I remember thinking, like, it was like, you just say higher power, say God, you worship a bottle of lotion if that's what you want to. We don't care. We want you to get sober. And I was really impressed with the openness of people to say that and then really share. Other than the guy with the cat scratch fever, most of the people there would just open up in a way like, I had never seen strangers just start crying in front of other strangers before. And even then I thought, you know what, when I do get sober, it may not be AA, but it's going to be in a room like this. And it
Yeah.
was. I went to Kaiser Permanente and got myself into a room like that. And Kaiser Permanente, between Kaiser and Obamacare for making sure I got health insurance to begin with, I can't speak enough about what Kaiser has done for me. And I know other people everybody has their own journey with that kind of thing, but Kaiser, man, I will always be grateful for Kaiser on Sunset in Los Angeles.
Love it. So do they use the same 12-step process as well?
No, my therapist there, Melissa, she uses I call it her triumvirate of power. It's integrity, gratitude, and humility, and those are her three main pillars of it. And then you go into alcohol awareness classes, you go into relapse prevention classes, and there's a little bit of mixture of them all. Like they'll reference AA, they'll reference 12 steps, they'll reference refuge recovery and SMART and young people in recovery. I mean, they'll reference a little bit of all of it, but really, it's their goal is to get you to understand that your relationship to alcohol was abusive, and to really get you to realize that this is what you've been doing to yourself. And she does a ton of reframing with me. Well, okay, this is how you're seeing it now, but what if you saw it this way? And I've been with her for 3.5 years now, of my years in sobriety. And it never fails. I'll think I've got everything on lockdown, and then something will happen and I'll bring an issue to her. And she's like, well, I told you about that 2 years ago. Let's go back. And sure enough, the answer's there. So it's a little bit of everything, because they don't have their own kind of structure to it as much as it's just their structure.
It's just their structure. Yeah. I think it's important to seek help. You know, some people do it on their own, but it's not necessarily easy to do it on your own. And it's really hard when you don't have family and friends that are supportive, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that say stupid stuff. I have been really big on that because there's a lot of assumptions and
Yeah.
judgment around people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol. And there's something going on. There's
Mm-hmm.
always something going on. There's another layer, but we're quick to judge. and we're quick to put people down, which makes it even harder to climb out of this hole when you
Oh
don't have
yeah.
the support of somebody kind of pulling you up and being supportive through that process. And so
Yeah.
I'm real big on just speaking on that because I wish people would
Yeah.
stop.
Vanessa, you make such a really good point there that it's amazing to me how much humans are willing to judge something that they don't understand, because it's almost like they're afraid of it. Like there's some sort of internal emotional charge they get, and since they don't understand it, the best way for them to just begin to even approach the subject is just mock it or ridicule it. And I see that on Instagram a lot, because I'm pretty big on Instagram. At From Sobriety to Recovery is my handle over there, and also I'll post something and people will, like, some rando will just comment, "Oh, people who are alcoholics and drug addicts are weak-minded." I'm like, dude, you know what? That right there, you just slid right behind all of us, because that is not even the beginning. That it makes no sense. Nobody in addiction recovery then, because they're some of the strongest willed, most amazing people I know. They've been through so much in our depths of despair. We able to still maintain jobs or the modicum of a relationship. I think we're extremely strong-willed, not necessarily more than a sober person or a normie, but we're just strong-willed. But their lack of knowledge, they say whack stuff, and then it's like that stigma. I live in LA. I don't deal with a stigma, because here in LA, like, everybody knows they're addicted to something. They're just not, how much of them are going to treatment. But I can only imagine, like, a small town in one of those drive-through states, what they must think about the local addict, right? Mayberry, the drunk who always ended up in the jail cell. That guy got mocked, but you know what, man, that was a bruised soul. If someone would have sat down with him and had a conversation, they would have known why, and they probably could have started to help him.
Yeah. If you just talk to people and not judge them and not be hard on them. I will tell you, I've met the most amazing and smart people. Just because you're an addict does not mean you're not smart. It does not.
I've read that we're super smart. I think that I've read that it would actually show the propensity to be too smart for our own good.
Right, right. So I'm like, and we're very creative in hiding it so that nobody knows. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
really knows what you're going through until it just, blows up on you. But we go through this for years. And I could tell people I used to go to work, wake up, go to work as if nothing was wrong when
Yeah.
I would drink every night to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Every night for probably a good 17 years, like almost 20, before I started working on it. And we're very creative. And I don't want people to ever think because they have some type of addiction that they're not important, that they're not special,
Mhm.
that you're not loved. And so often people feel that way in this
Yeah.
process.
They do. I think we wake up feeling like crap for so long, and we wake up knowing we didn't do the best that we could have the night before. And I mean, tens of thousands of mornings I woke up wondering where my car was, wondering if I pissed anyone off, wondering how much money I spent, and getting bad grades in college, or not even going to class, or making yelling at someone at work because I was hungover and I was cranky and I hadn't eaten a real meal in 4 days. And you to prove yourself. Oh goodness, of course my phone would ring. It never rings, and then it's going to ring now. You start to prove yourself almost that it's like you just have enough of that feedback loop that it's like, well, I can't be worth anything because look what I'm doing to myself. And it's not true. It's not true. And it does say it takes some time when you get sober to start to, prove your self-worth to yourself, but it's a process, and it absolutely can be done because hundreds of thousands of people have done it.
Yeah.
That's
And
what I tell anyone. Can I get sober? Yeah. Well, how do you know that? Because a million people have. We're not asking you to fly to Jupiter. Like, we're not really sure Elon Musk can get us to Mars. Let's face it, that no one's ever done that. We can get to the moon. That's been done. Where, when it was first ever done, you're like, well, maybe not. I don't know. But now we've been to the moon like 30 times. But we don't know about Mars. We know you can get sober because millions of people have done it. What your individual issues are, that's fine. We'll customize it, but we can still get you there.
Mhm. And we have to address the individual issues. Like, I don't think that you could successfully stay sober when you have things that kind of set you back. Like, if you are a survivor of incest or child sexual abuse and you're drinking to forget the memory, you kind of got to work on that in
Oh,
order
yeah.
to sustain sobriety. You have to work
Yeah.
on yourself and do the work. It is not easy. It's very challenging. And I tell people that
Yeah.
when you're ready, you got to put in the work and work on yourself so that you don't continue this journey of self-sabotage, because essentially that's what it is. You're just beating yourself up.
Yeah, it's almost like you break your leg, and of course you're going to put your cast on it, and that's going to heal the leg, right? And that's what sobriety can be. Sobriety is the cast. Taking the cast off would be addiction recovery. But if you don't rehabilitate that leg, then the atrophy that's in it, the weakness that's there, it's only going to make it continue to be weak, and you're just going to re-break it, right? So that's the work you're talking about, is that once it comes out of the cast and you get yourself into addiction recovery, which is whatever, that's when people really start to heal their trauma, that's when you start to rehab, that's when you get into addiction recovery, because they're not the same thing. Sobriety is white knuckling it, it's counting days, it's basically just doing the same thing you always did, just removing your addictive thing out of it. Whenever you really get into addiction recovery, you start to heal that incest, that trauma, the abuse, the beatings, whatever it might be, and that's the rehabilitation of the leg. And I have blown out both of my knees, and I will tell you, 4 years later, I'm still rehabilitating them. You don't stop working on that stuff. It just becomes less emotionally charging the further you get away from it.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Like, I can visualize my whole body being in a cast.
Yeah.
It's like a body cast.
Especially around the brain. You're like 87 casts around the brain, and that's the walls we build up, right? You're like, no. But the opposite of addiction is connection. And that's why you went to the group, and the ladies that you had just referenced earlier in South Carolina, like, the opposite of addiction is connection. The more you were connected to them, the stronger you got, the more they helped you rehabilitate. Yeah, of course you're enjoying chocolate, but you know what? There's all these other things that you can enjoy too. It can be done, but you definitely, I don't know how people do it by themselves.
Yeah. And I've met people that said I was able to do it, and they do it through prayer. Prayer is an option. Some people use meditation, but you really have to have a community so you don't isolate. A lot of people, we isolate ourselves after we're drinking or doing drugs. Now, I can say I never did drugs because I grew up in the projects with a lot of crackheads. And I always said, what they did, I don't want to do. Right.
You told me that when we first met, and I was like, you know what? I totally can relate. The reason I never did needle drugs was because of a movie by Leonardo DiCaprio called The Basketball Diaries. And I saw this as a teenager, and he's shooting up, doing needle drugs, whatever the drug was in there, heroin or meth, I'm assuming. But and I remember thinking, man, that did not turn out well for him. But Scarface looks super cool. So. Right.
So we have like logic to why we do certain things. Like, there's a lot of logic of why we do things. And for me, I also thought that alcohol was more accessible too. Like, I don't know like who to go get drugs from on the streets, or I wouldn't even want people to know. Like, I can easily go in the store, and it's normal to go in the store and buy alcohol, but not necessarily drugs for me. College, how accessible is drugs in college? And I don't think parents realize this. And definitely they don't have the conversation that they need to have before our kids go off to school. How easy was it for you?
I love that you bring this up. So these are my two podcast logos right there. And when I started From Sobriety to Recovery, I did it for the current addicts, me. I wanted to help people like me. And then the more I got into it, the more I was like, man, I wish somebody in college would have told me about this stuff when I was in college. And so I was like, okay, one is for current addicts and one is for the future addicts. And so College Success Habits, really, I barely touch upon studying at all. It is all emotional intelligence driven information. And because drugs and alcohol in college, it might as well be McDonald's in a city called McDonald's land. You can find drugs in a drop of a hat. You can, day one of college, I had people offering me marijuana, and it was only a matter of time before other LSD and cocaine and opioids started to show their faces. And next thing you know, you're taking Valiums and Percocets and Xanax. And because you have so many people in a condensed area, even people who aren't going to school will live in those areas and just deal drugs to the college students because there's a ton of disposable income. So if you're not having the conversation with your kids about alcohol and drug use that's going to happen in college, don't worry. Their friends and their dealer will have it with them. And I can assure you that conversation will go sideways for you as the parent, and definitely for the student. The conversation has to be, I don't care how, I was a 4.0 student in high school. I ranked 7th in my high school class. was absolutely one of those people that was to succeed when I went off to college. I was super driven. I even went to Bible study once in a while. My girlfriend in high school was like a pre-med kind of woman. And, I wouldn't even, by the time I made it to college, I was already into drugs and alcohol, and it was inevitable where I was going to go with that.
Yeah.
So do not allow high school behavior to even remotely indicate to you what you think your college kid will do when they get there, because it is not the same.
It's not the same. Yeah. You have to have the conversation because life happens. And even though you do talk about drugs and alcohol with your kids, you have to get down in the dirty. Like, this is really what can happen, right? I need you to know that this is the results if you were to do the drugs and alcohol. And I remember growing up, this is your brain on drugs, like the Ronald.
I learned it from watching you. All
the commercials and stuff, so I do remember that. So my point is, when you have the conversations, they walk away with remembering that, and we want to protect them. And I can tell you that alcohol and drugs is a gateway to sexual assault. Hands down,
Yeah.
when they're on the drugs, when they're drinking, not even necessarily drunk, people get sexually assaulted, and they go hand in hand. And alcohol is the easiest way to drug someone and to rape them, period.
Yes.
And so I'm real big on watching it when you're drinking out in public, how much you digest, because we want you to stay safe. So I want parents to think about it from that perspective too, not just the drugs and alcohol, but what things can really happen to you when you're drinking. So important.
Yes. It's so important. It is. I mean, through the moon, it's important. I did an article at University of Florida. I was a journalism major on sexual assault. And so one of my things was just go around and ask 100 different women that would answer this question. I guess some people who were not keen on answering the question was, have you ever been assaulted during your high school or college years? And I was like, and that can be anything from just having your butt or your chest groped all the way, obviously, to the worst case scenario. And I remember for a fact, it came out to roughly about 80% It ended up being 4 out of 5 had felt sexually violated by the time they were 20 to 21 in college. And so you think about how many, millions, you just start to extrapolate those numbers out to be sexualized. And then you start to drink, and then all of a sudden, inhibitions, and hey, oh, she doesn't remember what she did, and he doesn't remember what he did. And it is a slippery slope. But you want people to have fun. You want them to go out and enjoy themselves and enjoy the college experience. It's almost like you really like pay to have a bouncer always following them, because it's, and now there's GHB, and I'm sure GHB was a thing back in the early 2000s. I have no idea what the kids would use today. I say
Molly.
kids, like Molly, and I mean, and I took my fair share of ecstasy, and I never really thought that it took me away from my own abilities. But then again, I was also an expert LSD, so I had no problem with my faculties. But you throw some ecstasy in someone who's never even done those kind of things before. Yeah. So you're right. And I think that conversation needs to be more spoken about.
Yeah. And our kids know more about drugs than what we think they do. Don't underestimate the knowledge. Oh my gosh. And marijuana is acceptable. Like, they don't believe that that's really a drug. So you definitely have to have the conversations with them early on. I always tell, when I'm training and I talk about drug-facilitated sexual assault, yes, that really is a thing. I talked to them about Molly and how I was in the club one day and this lady was dancing very provocative, and she took a towel that she was using to wipe her face, and she pulled up her dress and wiped between her legs. And I was like, did y'all see that? And nobody thought it was abnormal. They was like, oh, she's on that Molly. And I was like, what? Like, is this normal behavior? And she was sweating real bad. And sometimes our environment think that it's okay. They're not looking at the addiction. Maybe it's just a one night, but everybody can't just walk away from it once they try it the first time.
No, and and one night could be enough. I mean, I think they call it Molly because it's based with MDMA, which is a psychoactive drug that really causes the hallucinatory effects. And that woman could be stumbling around later on that night, and or I mean, it definitely makes the sensory perception much more heightened.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody comes up and they're rubbing all down and everything feels great, and you wake up the next morning and you don't really remember much of anything before after 9 p.m. And that's just no way to wake up in the morning. It's yeah, I don't think we ever can completely stop the way the alcohol and drugs are being used, but there's certainly an education that can go there, that it's like, okay, at a certain point, I think it's time to grab an Uber and go home.
Yeah.
We didn't have Google, right? There's Google, there's Uber, there's a lot of options that, boy, if I'd have had in 1994, my goodness gracious. Now there's camera phones, which are, you can videotape somebody assaulting, somebody else, and oh, look what just happened. Also, people can take provocative pictures of you while you're in a compromising state of blacked outness, and next thing you know, it's all over TikTok in the morning. So
You don't never know. For me, I thought that drinking was a way that I didn't want to remember. So I would have nightmares. I was very hyper vigilant. I could hear everything. And so if I was drinking, I didn't have to deal with all the extra stuff that was going on. Essentially it was PTSD, but I didn't have to deal with it if I was drinking. So I didn't want to remember the next day. Like
yeah,
I didn't want to remember that I got up and checked all the windows and the doors because I heard something and it freaked me out. So I was okay with not remembering.
yeah. Well, I think it's super important that we have these conversations, Doc, because okay, like I never had the sexual assault.
Right.
I only knew women who had, for me. And so when I go to talk to some of my clients or just some people in recovery in general, they'll say, well, you didn't have this happen to you. You just did this. And I was molested by my dad and my uncle and then raped in high school and college. And I'm like, okay, absolutely. I can attest that you have got some trauma. We're not trying to, this isn't a trauma contest
Yeah,
here,
don't
right?
stop me.
We're not doing that. Oh yeah, well I had this and you had that. Like okay, so we got some trauma, we got some suffering, but it's important that I meet people like you and so when I tell them like, look, we all have our different levels of trauma, it can be worked through. And again, because people have done it, you can either keep swimming in your own BS and in your own crap and your horrible stories from your childhood and your college years. And it's like, oh my God, I wish some people you could just erase it for them and they could never have experienced it, but they did. And you can keep living that and letting that anchor you down. You can lift that off and you can finally release it and you can fly so high up. It's possible. And it's important, people like you who have had the sexual assault, it's very important that you speak up, because for those who think that it's not attainable to overcome and become the best version of themselves, they need to see people like you who've actually done it, and not only done it, but then started ways to help other people do it.
Yeah. And even for you, I think it's important to hear people's story to say if they could do it, it's possible that I can too. And changing our mindset, like you said, mindset and empowerment. That is so
Yeah.
important. How we view it, it's possible to come out of it. But you got to have a desire.
Yeah, one of my friends once asked me, because I do neurolinguistic programming to help people overcome their trauma, and they were like, "Well, do you think that you could help rehabilitate a pedophile?" I'm like, "I could help rehabilitate anyone if they're willing to accept the help. That's the first step. I mean, what that person, that pedophile, that's atrocious, and they're going to deserve whatever punishment they get. But if you meet them 50 years after they've done their time and now they're ready to rewire themselves, it can be done. Are they ready to do it? Right? The car can be fixed or not fixed if the car is ready to, if you're ready to drive it to the mechanic. But if you just leave the car in the driveway and say, well, the car's been broken down, well, because you didn't take it somewhere to get fixed. Like, you have to take the step. If you try to drag someone there, as soon as you turn their back, they run back to wherever they were. So they have to want it for themselves in here. And I think some people don't realize how much social awkwardness or isolation in middle school and high school can honestly start addiction processes early on. And they think, oh, that loner kid, he just didn't fit in. He'll figure it out when he gets to college. He will. He'll just figure it out with a straw in one hand and a needle in the other. Some trauma is so silent that people don't even realize it's trauma until they're already 22 years into an addiction.
They don't even know that it affected them. Not even that it was trauma. They don't even know that they were affected by the trauma. They're just thinking that this is just where they are. How did you get there? And I think you also have to forgive yourself. Like you said, the first step is really want to do it and forgiving yourself for all the mistakes that you've made, and just be gentle with yourself.
Yeah, that I teach this in my Wise Mind Empowerment course that I specifically built as like this toolbox resource for my sobriety clients. And it when you go to forgive yourself, you really have to reprogram the way you talk to yourself inside your own head. Those automatic negative thoughts and constantly beating yourself up, like as if that has ever really been a good way to talk to yourself. When you start to shift the way you talk to yourself inside your head, it actually shifts the way that you talk to other people too. And to me, it accelerates the recovery, because you can't, man, if you're every time you look in the mirror, you say, "I hate you, Jesse, you're a dunderhead." I mean, would you talk to a child that way? Would you talk to someone else you loved that way? I don't understand why we talk to ourselves that way and then think that it's actually useful.
Right. We have to talk to ourselves and be gentle. I'm like, you got to be softer with yourself. It's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Like
When you
like a 7-year-old. We're all little 7-year-olds inside saying, "Mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, watch me, watch me." And then mommy, daddy, daddy, and everybody else didn't watch us. And we got very isolated and alone, and trauma and suffering came. And so how would you hug a 7-year-old if they were bruised and they needed to be, empowered? Would you yell, "Ah!" Or would you, bring them over and say, "Look, let's talk about it. We can work with it. We can work through this." Treat yourself like that 7-year-old.
How many times did you stop and start again?
Countless. I had a person who had shown interest in hiring me, and then ultimately, I think the last question he ever asked me was, were you able to just stop right away and not use? And I was like, yeah, because I was thinking about the time right here. My last time was my last time. But then, like, the moment he got off the phone, I was like, well, I lost him, because he's going to think, oh, this guy doesn't understand relapse. I mean, hundreds of times I would wake up in the morning and say, I'm never going to drink again. And I'm like, okay, just go a day. And then I went to go 3 and then 7, and then the body would feel better and I'd go back. And some of those were half-hearted. And other ones I was like, you know what? I got to stop. I've got to stop. And I'd go 2, 3, 4 months. And then, maybe I got the grades in college I needed, or I got the job I was not doing drugs in order to pass the drug test for. And then it was like, oh, yay. Maybe just one. Okay. Well, it's only one. It's only one. What's one?
I got
it. What's one? So this last one to me was the only time I was really serious. But that other version of me, the addict version of me, he thinks he tried hundreds of times to quit. But once I got sober, I realized what it really means to walk away from that world and know it's the last time.
Yeah. And I ask you that because a lot of times we try and we fail and we try again, and that's okay. You keep trying. Don't give up. I don't want people to give up. And don't think that we just started to say, hey, we're going to stop drinking and we're going to stop doing the drugs, and it happened. It's a journey. So don't give up. You got to keep trying until you hit that time. And I had a girlfriend who said, you just can't have one drink. People love to ask me that. So you just can't have one drink? No. I cannot have one drink, because one drink comes to 2, then it's 3. Next thing I know, I done had the whole bottle. And I'm like, no, that's how I started up. I cannot drink.
And why? When you create a life that doesn't need to be escaped from, it doesn't. I mean, for me, I go to bars. There's alcohol in my house because my girlfriend's got alcohol in the house. It's not like, oh, leave. I can't wait to drink. I'm not trying to escape anything. And back to your point, there is no failure. There's only feedback. If you tried once and it didn't work, I did want this thing didn't work, right? So where's the feedback? The feedback is in the application. You tried to apply sobriety, it didn't take, evaluate what happened, and then go back and then reapply it, shifting one or two, preferably one thing at a time, so you can figure out what is that key, what is that driver. There is no failure, there's only feedback. And when you start to create the life you don't want to escape from, the idea, like, people are like, what, it's just one, but I'm like, what is your obsession with one? That's my question back. Like, what do you think I'm going to accomplish with one drink of scotch? I don't want there's a Kendrick Lamar song. I think it's called Swimming Pools. And it's about his grandfather who was an alcoholic. And he talks about wanting an entire swimming pool full of booze. I used to joke with my friends that if the ocean was made out of Jameson or Johnny Walker Blue, it still wouldn't be enough scotch. Why on earth do I want one? I don't want none. And I really would prefer everybody realize that you can use that as a recreational device, but not everything you do should be centered around, is there going to be a bar when we get there?
Right. So I had to take off a year. I love football. You're a Gator fan. I absolutely love you. Go Gators. Uh, I couldn't watch football for a whole year because of that, being around that environment. I had to separate myself. Now I am good. But that first year,
Mhm.
I just had to change my whole environment. And I knew if I went to the bar and I said I didn't want to drink, they was going to say, why? What's wrong with you? You feeling okay?
Mhm.
And they were going to all buy me drinks. So it
Well, of
was
course.
like, I need to just stay away from that environment.
Oh yeah.
Helped me by changing my circle. And now I am fine, but I couldn't do it for the first year.
That's a really great that you bring that up. Be prepared to have to sacrifice some things that you loved in your previous life as you transition to your new life. And for me, I went to Refuge Recovery at the beginning of August, whenever the football season was getting ready to start. And there was a meeting every Sunday afternoon at around 5 p.m. And I made it my mission to hit every single one during the football season, because Sundays used to be my blackout day. I'd get bombed on Saturdays for college football, wake up with a massive hangover at like 3 or 4 in the morning, because I usually blacked out and passed out at like 5 p.m. on Saturday. And then I would just start slamming back booze at like 4 a.m. on a Sunday. So I was blacked out by noon. I didn't even remember the morning games. And so I said, well, you know what? Now that I'm sober, I want to watch football, but I have to have something that reminds me that there's a bigger purpose than just being bombed out watching football. So Refuge Recovery became my answer. And I went from the beginning of the football season to the end. And it was my saving grace as far as just keeping me anchored. So I like that you realize, nope, this is 1 year. It's 1 year.
Yeah.
It's 1 year. You got 50 more years of life ahead of you.
It was hard. Everybody know I'm a diehard football fan. So I would start on Thursday nights because we got Thursday night football, right? We got some games on Friday. Then on Saturday, it was just a done deal because that's college all day, right? Then we back to Sunday. And what people don't realize is you kind of got to start drinking again the next day to feel better. It's like
hair of the dog. Hair of the dog.
You gotta start again.
Besides, you can't drink all day if you don't start early. That used to be my favorite saying.
How long? 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Like 5 o'clock in the morning. What time? What time did you start drinking, Jesse? I'm like, hey, you know what? I woke up at 5 a.m. There was a bottle of wine. I slammed it. I was like, okay, I'm good. Let's do this.
And I'm good. Yeah. It was really bad. I would use pickle juice to settle my stomach and to just make me feel better. So I will carry pickle juice in my car after I'm drinking out at a night. Me and my girl.
I didn't know that.
Pickle juice. Yeah. So anybody that's carrying pickle juice, a lot of times they might have an addiction problem.
I didn't even know that was a thing. See? And this is what I'm talking about. Addicts are strong-minded. Like, we're figuring out some stuff. Right? Like I would go to Vegas and I would make myself get sick at like 7 o'clock at night and then again at midnight just so I could keep drinking. Like, we figure out ways to do things. I mean, it's we put our bodies through stuff that is, I mean, do you look back at it now and just marvel at the idiocracy of the things that you would put yourself through in order to just keep blinding yourself to your addiction?
Yeah, I am actually amazed that I survived. I thank God for favor and grace. Definitely was protected.
Oh,
but,
my guardian angels are exhausted. Like, they're seriously like, they're like, oh, thank God he got sober. We're going to take a nap for like 20 years.
We could laugh about it and actually talk about it now because we're not there anymore. And it's just a form of, I know people are saying, well, how can you be laughing about being an alcoholic? But it's because we're in such a great place now. You can look back and say, boy, I went through some crazy stuff. There's times I just don't remember. I know I don't remember. Or my friends will tell a story and they're dying laughing. And I'm like, I don't even remember that. I didn't do that, So I'm just thankful for the place that I am now. Very grateful. Very grateful.
Yeah, it breaks my heart how many funny stories that start off with this one time Jesse was blacked out. And I'm like, okay, that's great that you guys got to laugh. And like, I mean, hey, Don't hate something that once used to make you smile. Like, okay, that's me, that's my story, that's I'll laugh at those stories just as much as the next person. But it's just a damn shame I couldn't be present for them because they sounded hilarious, right? I'm just like, there was a lot of amazing times people have, and they go to tell me, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And they're like, yeah, well, that doesn't surprise us. I have a lot of my friends, my old drinking buddies from Gainesville, we used to have nicknames. And so one person would be like Tornado or Hurricane. And I was Apocalypse Jesse, because all of those other things were nothing compared to what I was going to do when I came to town. Because it's 7 straight days of drinking, blacked out, find me downtown in a dumpster, whatever, just normal Jesse stuff.
Yeah. So I never was found in a dumpster, right?
I'm very happy that you don't have that memory.
I'd be asleep though. Everybody's like, you always asleep. I would drink to go to sleep. But, and I've had my share of drinking guys under the table. It was so bad, Jesse. I would have bets that I could drink the next guy under the table so that he could pay for the bar tab. And I knew I would win. Or like all of my friends would be like, Vanessa can outdrink you. And if she outdrink you, you got to pay for the tab. And I would do it. Like I would drink men under the table. I did a lot of drinking in my time, and I didn't always pay because I would make a bet with some sucker that never bet me before. And that's how I used to pay for it sometimes, And so I just look back and just laugh, and I thank God for where I am, and I so openly share to encourage others.
I think it's important to not only share about it, and I have my online course, and we meet every other Wednesday to just talk about the material in the online course. And someone asked that, they're like, is it okay to reminisce and and just laugh and enjoy those stories? And we had a really good discussion about it. And what came of that was, yes, if you try to like push it back and hide from it, that just makes it worse. Now, am I trying to glorify it, romanticize it? I'm not going to sit here, and necessarily do that. But I mean, if I get in a situation where some people want to reminisce about some stuff, okay, I'll talk about it. I'll laugh like we just did about our stories. It's like, okay, it happened, but I'm telling you, I'm much happier with this version of myself I am now. So I think it's important to talk about sobriety and recovery just as much as it's okay to reminisce once in a while, because a lot of really amazing moments happened in our lives, and alcohol was always there. So if we try not to ever talk about things that we did while we were drinking, then we don't get to talk about those weddings and those birthdays and those bar mitzvahs and graduations. We're leaving out, for me, 22 years of life. Remember that one time that we went bowling? Yeah, and I guarantee you I was secretly drinking vodka out of a water bottle so my bar tab wouldn't be too high. So I don't want to, I don't romanticize it or glorify it, but I definitely think that people should be okay discussing it, because it's a part of what created you, and you here today is amazing. So let's embrace every version of you, knowing that our fullest potential is just along the other side of discipline.
I love it. I love it. Yep, you're right. Okay, so I want to know if there's one thing that you can tell somebody who has a family member that is struggling with drug addiction or alcohol addiction. What is something that they can do to support a family member or a friend?
Talk to them without judgment. Like, do you really sit down and talk to them without judgment? And when I say talk to them without judgment, I mean really release judgment and ask them what's going on in their life, and then just provide a safe space for them to be vulnerable and actually listen. I notice a lot of people want to go straight into, well, this is what you could do. Go to this meeting, go to this meeting, go to this meeting, and do this and do this. And it's like tips, tricks, and advice and hacks. And it's like, that person, you know what? They've already thought of all of that stuff. You're not rewriting the Bible. You're not bringing some amazing thing down off the mountain. You are literally telling them stuff that they've probably already researched. Instead, just be there for them and let them be vulnerable and sad, and and don't judge it, and don't try to give them advice and tell them, oh, well, I don't understand why that's a problem for you, that my dad died too. It's like, that's not helping anyone. Everybody's suffering is their own. I often think that it's because people want to go straight to advice land instead of compassionately listening land, that so many people just don't talk about their addiction to people because no one's really listening. They're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can talk again.
Yeah, I think that is so important. So, because you don't want to talk about it because you don't want to be judged.
Don't want to be judged.
You don't want to hear the slick comments, and that does not help when you're talking to a family member or friend. Mm-mm. It doesn't help.
Write this down on one piece of paper if you guys are taking notes. Do not seek right or wrong. nor do not seek judgment. Seek to understand. Seek to understand. Stop talking long enough to understand where that person's coming from. And I assure you, you will find an insight in there. And if nothing else, just listening and that support will change their life.
And I think it's important that if you do have the conversation is, how can I help you? What do you need from me? And if they say nothing, it's nothing.
It's nothing.
If they want you to find a treatment program for them, then help them. But if they're not asking you for it, you're really wasting your time because they're not ready.
Not ready.
Everybody is not ready when you think they should be ready, or that their rock bottom doesn't look like a rock bottom that you think rock bottom should look like.
My stepdad used to put AA papers on my bed and be like, I think you have a problem. I'm like, yeah, no duh, I have a problem. And I don't care about any of this stuff. Leave me alone. I'm going to get drunk. I wasn't ready for it. You can't, it's like they say in marketing, in business, facts tell and stories sell. You got to listen to the person's stories because that's where they're emotionally at. You come at them with facts. 87% of people who drink 5 drinks a day are alcoholics. They don't care. If facts honestly stopped people from doing things, no one would ever have smoked a cigarette once the truth came out in the 80s. People would have stopped on a dime, right? Logic doesn't always work with the unconscious mind. It's an emotional place inside there. A 7-year-old who knows that if they eat chocolate all the time, they're going to have cavities. They don't care. They want chocolate today. They don't care about cavities tomorrow. You have to wait for them to come to you.
That's it. Yeah. And I think it's so important for people to understand that so that you could do more help than harm. A lot of times family members and friends harm you with the conversations that they have. So just be supportive. Just listen. And condemn then judge, because it doesn't help at all. Everybody have their own journey. And we all have something that we have a problem with. It might be shopping. It might be eating. It's just
everybody's addicted to something. And I look for some of your listeners out there, they might immediately want to headbutt me. What did I just say? We're not seeking to right or wrong. We're just seeking to understand. I am human beings are habit creatures. We create habits in our unconscious mind so our brains can use less energy. So whether it's shopping or sex or food or automatic negative self-talk, yelling at your partner instead of opening up and telling them why you're really hurt. I mean, we're all addicted to something. It's just how willing are you to actually pull back that curtain and see Oz back there for who he truly is. Where it's not bad that we're addicted. It's natural. Been programmed to us since we were cavemen and cave women and cave people. Know where the saber-toothed tiger is hiding so it doesn't eat you. We have been programming ourselves since the dawn of time. It is not a surprise that we're doing it now. It's just now we have things that are actually scientifically built to make us more addicted to them.
Right. I like that. I really like that point. So we're getting ready to come to a close. It went by so fast.
No,
I love talking.
no. You'll be on my show soon enough because I can't get enough of your energy. And now I want to ask you questions. You've asked me tons. I'm ready to ask you questions.
Ask me questions. Yeah, I love it. Before we get out of here, I want to know how people can contact you. What is anything that you want to bring up before we get out of here, or just words of encouragement, but I definitely want you to speak on how people can contact you.
Awesome. Yes, I'm huge on Instagram at From Sobriety to Recovery. It's the name of that podcast right there. At Jesse Mogle too. It's just my name. It's my other Instagram account. Please hit me up there. I have my Wise Mind Empowerment course. It is an amazing toolbox to help you with your emotional, your physical, your mental, your spiritual empowerment and growth. It's just, you can overcome anything that you think is holding you back. You can. I know when you are 87 feet down in the dirt and it's all coming around you, you just don't ever see a way out. Ask for help. Go somewhere. I called Kaiser and they said, come on in, and it changed everything. Your rock. Oh, you know what? If I was to have a parting word, rock bottoms don't have to be what everybody thinks a rock bottom is. You don't have to be sleeping in an alley in a dumpster with no shoes, no house, no family, no money. I held on to my job, I held on to my car, I held on to my apartment. I woke up in a bathtub one day covered in my own filth, and I looked in the mirror, and for years I had always asked myself, at what age do you go from being a person who had a ton of potential to being a person who wasted a ton of potential? And on January 12th, 2017, I looked at myself in the mirror and I realized that I was teetering on the precipice. And if I didn't make a change that day, death was nigh. And whatever you think your rock bottom is, accept that that was what it was and call and reach out for help. To me, to Dr. Vanessa, to somebody out there is willing to take their time. The National Suicide Hotline, there's always someone who's willing to bend an ear and show you compassion and love. Please accept it.
I love that. Thank you. Great parting words. So I honor you in this moment. I am so proud of you and your sobriety. And it's just like you're my brother. Like we just got so much to talk about. Like,
Oh yeah, the moment we met, I was like, oh my goodness, we're gonna be buddies. We're gonna be buddies.
it's real cool. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. If you are struggling with any type of alcohol addiction, drug addiction, don't beat yourself up. It is true to take it one day at a time. It is possible to stop. We are both proof of that. We're not like 20, 30 years sober. You know, we're in recovery. We're working on ourselves every single day. It is a journey, but it's possible. So just believe it. You have to believe it. And when you're ready, it'll work itself out. Family and friends, be supportive of those who are struggling. Don't be so quick to judge. And always show love and kindness when you're talking to them and be there for them when they are ready, not when you're ready for them to stop. It's when they're ready to stop. That's how we become successful. So, Hush No More Champions is every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're always live on Facebook, and you can always find us on YouTube or in the Hush No More Champions podcast. Next week, we have Arthur Mitchell. He's going to talk about how our disabilities do not define us. On the 25th, we are going to have Dr. Liza Jones, and she's going to talk about how to be in the fight, supporting those who are going through trauma when you're going through your own trauma. So important to address that. How do we help others? And deal with our own garbage, because that's what I call it. It's a lot of garbage. So thank you for joining us. Peace and blessings to you all. It is truly an honor to be here with you, to just encourage you. Share this video because there's a lot of people out here struggling with alcohol addiction and that trauma. We got to work on our trauma for us to end this. So peace and blessings. Thank you once again, Jesse. And I will see you next week.